Yamsketch.
So we've been looking at noses. We've been looking at different techniques for drawing noses. And I think we need to take a look at the profile. So let's take a look at the profile. Do not neglect the profile. And we were using a couple of brushes to sort of just jumpstart you. Obviously, you could just draw this, but because we have them, let's use them. So I'm using this Crescent sphere brush, and the reason that I'm using this brush is just to remind you when you're drawing, these are 3D forms. They're spheres and shapes that we're imagining when we're drawing simple things like circles and ovals. That really makes a difference, because if you're drawing a circle and only thinking circle, it's not going to come out the same as someone who's drawing a circle but thinking of a 3D sphere and thinking about how the 3D shapes connect together, right? So let's just keep using this. So we need the bulb of our nose. So let's pull down so the shadow's kind of down, or maybe down and away. There we go. So bulb of the nose, that's going to be the largest part, probably, but everyone's different. Some people have smaller noses, so actually we can draw a smaller one. Let's do like a small bulb. Yeah, that's like a very small bulb. And then let's get some nostrils going too. So on this one, we'll get some good sized nostrils. And again, lighting, we'll just pull down to get the same lighting. So this is from the side, so we're only going to see one nostril, but keep in mind there is one behind there somewhere. Okay. And then for this guy, this could be bigger nostrils than tip. That happens. And so I'm going to kind of put the nostril back here a little bit, maybe here. This is interesting. So this has the same nostril size as this guy, even though the tip is way different. Okay. And then the last shape that I'm going to use is, I just want to indicate the brow up here somewhere. So I can already tell you we're running out of room. So let's just move this down. Come on, what's your stuff? Okay. And then I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller brows. Okay, so remember, there's also two brows, so probably brow here, brow there, right? Like that kind of thing. So that's the cool thing about the sphere. You can think about this as a 3D shape, okay? So now let's just grab a normal draw-in brush. I'm going to draw just with a pencil. And let's make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see. There we go. That's a little bit too big. There, good. All right, so with this, the bulb of the nose is set, right? But not always. You know, some people have a really round bulbous nose, but most people have a shape. Like it's either sharp, it's pointing up, or it's pointing down like a hook nose. So remember, when you use these brushes, like the brushes that I'm including with the spheres and stuff, the point of these brushes is a guide. It's not to draw it for you. So just remember that, like, you're still going to have to think about this stuff. Like, what's the shape of that person's nose? Let's give this guy kind of a square nose, almost like this one here. Like a squared off nose a little bit, okay? But just look at your reference to see on that. So I'm going to kind of square this nose off a little bit, and then let's look at this guy for the bridge reference. He's got a bridge of the nose right there, so let's do the same thing. Bridges, and then comes in here to the brow. So I'm going to split that one sphere in half into kind of two brows, right? Okay, so we know that the eyebrows will start here on this side. So that's cool. So there's an eyebrow in there. And we know that the eye's in here somewhere because we need an eye socket. And we're from the side of the head, right? We're in profile. So we also know that the nostril comes in here. So again, you don't have to draw a perfect circle just because we stamped a sphere, you know, but that's to help us remember that there's a shadow down here and this thing is a 3D form and this form is going to wrap into this form, right? We can get our nostril here really easily because you can see where that sphere is wrapping in. But I erased my eyebrow. But keeping in mind that this is where it ends, you know, we can pick the shape of the nostril. So some people like this reference here. It's kind of like a hanging nostril. So I like that. That's good. Some people wrap around, some people tuck, but let's just go like that. All right, cool. So now we come in with the nostril, and you can kind of see that a nostril comes in and it wraps around because this skin folds under, right? But some people are not that pronounced, like from the side especially. Like some people might be like that. Some people might come up and have like a real pronounced nostril. You just have to look, right? So with this guy, not super pronounced. So we can kind of just get away with this kind of thing where the nostrils up and under there. We know it is. And then we can have just like a shadow coming out. Okay? So the cool thing here is you can see, because we're using this brush, that the shadow is going to come in here. And then once we hit this other sphere, this is going to create another shadow. So this is going to kind of fold in. So you just sort of blend these two forms together, right? You just follow the two forms. So now we know that there's going to be probably some shadows down here, and then probably a little bit darker right here where the two forms connect together, right? So, but let's just put that into shadow so we can start to get the shape of our nose here. Let's put this one into shadow. This is under the nose, and our light's like here. Okay, and then let's put our brow into shadow. So this, you can see that the brow shape is coming into shadow too. So that, let's see, that one on this side goes into shadow. This one on this side goes into shadow a little bit. And how dark is it? That depends how pronounced their brow is. So again, a lot of this is like depends on your reference, but it really does. So just make sure you're looking at what you're doing. All right, so now the interesting thing is, from the side of the face, we have a thing that we didn't really look at from the front of the face, which is the cheek. The cheek is a huge part of how the nose connects to the face. So the brows, we can kind of guess, like this is kind of going to go up into the forehead and then to the top of the skull, and you're going to have hair and all that stuff, right? And that can be, you know, you're going to have different haircuts, who knows, but we're not going to worry about that. And you have, you know, the brow kind of coming up and around here. Well, that's all good, but to really finish this nose, we have to know where the cheek is. So one thing that I see a lot is that people don't give enough depth to the cavity where the eye goes, and that's a big part of your skull. So just make sure that you're remembering you have this big socket on the side of your skull that has to be big enough to fit the whole ball of your eye, and then the eyelid goes over that, and we only see a small part of that ball, right? But in fact, the whole eyeball is there. So you need like at least like this much space just for your eyeball, and then that has to fit into side bone so that your actual eye socket is quite large. So just keep that in mind. So from the side, the eye socket would look something like this. It's not perfectly round because you have bones and stuff like that, and you have this kind of bone. But let's just make it a round thing for ease. So let's make sure we got enough room for an eyeball in there. Let's make about that big. And let's make sure that the lid is pulling around the eyeball, which means we need enough space in here. So you can't just put the eye up here. You can't do that. That's not good, because where is their eyeball going to go? That's not going to work. So make sure you give them enough space, and then pull that across their eyeball. And then you can think about, you know, their pupil and stuff like that. Okay? So think about big to small. That's always, 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 always. Big to small, big to small. Make sure the eyeball can fit before you start drawing eyelashes. And then, you know, any folds of skin that you might have, you know, if you're, you know, if you need to get some sleep, get some bags under those eyes and so on. Okay. And then of course, this is all going to fall into shadow because it's under the brow. So this is all going to fall into shadow. And then depending on how pronounced your eyes are, you know, it might all be in shadow or just parts of it. You just got to look at your reference. So let's see. Here's our brow. Here's our guy in shadow. And then we can decide now that we have the eye, from the eye, the cheek comes out. So if he's got a sharp cheek, it might be out like that. If he's got a soft cheek, it could be like this, or anywhere in between. You just have to look at your reference. We're going to give this guy a little bit of a sharper cheek. So the cheek comes out from under the eye and basically goes through that area where the nostril tucks into the nose. So it's basically that, because it's a muscle that goes all the way around your mouth. Okay? It's a pretty important muscle. So just keep in mind that this is kind of like a flow here. It goes from the eye all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to kind of stylize that, draw down here, and just sort of think about this as like a soft shadow. So this is catching light. This isn't in shadow. This has got a bunch of light, but it's going to fade away as we go around, and at some point it's going to fall into shadow. And it depends on how high his cheekbone is. We're drawing a dude for this one. We'll draw a woman for this one. Okay, so we have this one kind of tucking in here, and we can kind of exaggerate this shadow a little bit because we have strong light coming from here. So we can say, okay, well, this should be in shadow too, right? This should be in shadow. And then that means that it has to cast a shadow under it because this is a ball, right? And balls cast shadows. So that sphere is going to cast that shadow. This nose, which is giant, is also going to cast a shadow all the way down here, right? That's going to cast a shadow. So let's make sure we get that. So let's draw his lips in. Okay. There we go. And his lips are going to be in shadow. All right, there's his upper lip, lower lip. Kind of like a intimidating looking guy. I gave him sort of this Cro-Magnon brow, so I thought I'd, in the big like Roman boxer nose. So I decided to kind of make him a burly dude. Okay, so that'll go into here, and then that can just sort of softly fade out. Okay, so that's one way to think about this muscle, because this muscle is going to connect into the lips. That's how you guys get dimples. For all you guys that got dimples, guys and gals, the dimples are where this muscle comes into here, right? That's where that is. Okay, where it tucks into the mouth. So here we go. There's his chin. So there we go. And then the bulb on the nose itself does go all the way around. So this is actually all in shadow too, but it's going to be really soft shadow, right? So where the nostril connects in, that's still a sphere. This is still a sphere. So we can just very softly shade this up. And you can kind of see that by knowing that it's a form, and I'm just harping on this. I know I'm harping on it, but come on. When you're drawing and you're just drawing a circle, it's not the same as when you're drawing and you're drawing a circle, but you're thinking sphere. A lot of it happens in your head, because then what you draw next makes sense based off of that, right? So since I'm thinking of these things as spheres, like where I'm placing the next lines makes more sense because I'm planning for it. And that all happens in your head. You can't really, like it, you get better at it with experience, but it happens in your head. And then when you draw it, it just looks like it came out easy, but actually it's different because you thought about it. So, all right. So, and then I'm thinking about any other muscles that might wrap around here. He's a burly guy, so he's probably got like, some muscles here, maybe even one here. So I could sort of indicate that with a little bit more shading. But basically, I can just bridge of the nose in there, right? Well, let's make him, he's got that kind of bridge. So then we can just shade off like that. Shade like that, shade like that. Boom. So now we got his nose. And then this one, we're probably going to have to softly shade from this dark shadow. Just keep blending it. Just blend it in. Okay, great. And it doesn't matter if you're using paint or a pen or you're doing, color work. It's just however you want to shade shadow. And then this might not be in perfectly bright light. It probably is going to be kicked back a little bit, but it just in brighter light on the highlights here than in where it's in shadow fully, right? So there we go. There's our basic burly man shadow shape, and then we can think about behind his cheek and then how that shades away, right? So we could draw out this guy's whole face. We're going to stop there so we can draw a woman, but it's the same stuff, same technique. So we're going to take a burly dude, shoop. Okay, we're going to take him, move him over here. Okay, and then let's take a look at what this will turn into, right? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so it's the same stuff, nothing new. We have the brows here, right? And we have a pointier nose, but again, it's not going to be a perfect circle. We're just using that as a guide. So let's say that this one is kind of a button nose that points on top a little bit. Okay, so that goes up a little bit. And then we have a large nostril here, which means we'll probably see like an elongation here. Like this will probably get stretched because it's such a big nostril. So that'll probably get all stretched out wide. Okay, so let's just stretch that out. Yeah, there we go. Stretched out wide. That still tucks in there. There's the nostril from the side. And you can see that there's a huge range of shapes that you see in noses. So you can't really go wrong as long as you're following the fundamentals. There really is all sorts. You can see that we're using the same size nostril here for this dainty face. as we are for this burly dude. He just has a big bulbous nose, so it really made a difference, right? And also the bridge. Like instead of doing that Roman bridge, I'm doing a softer one. There. I'm doing like this nice soft one, okay? And then that delicately sort of wraps around. And then this is a button nose, so maybe I'll just kind of shade this part here as this kind of comes in like that, right? So we know, you can see it, so we know that the shadow is going to come in here, and then it's going to connect to this nostril, and it's going to come in there. And so we can softly shade this. Now this one isn't a burly guy, it's not like this kind of pug of a man, so I'm going to be more delicate with how I handle this. I'm not going to make this, I don't want this woman to be all ugly. So I'm going to handle it a little bit more delicately, not go as like heavy with the shapes and the cut-ins, and I'm not going to draw this muscle. No, that would make her look pretty ugly, see? And then so come in here, draw like a delicate lips, draw some lips, and then like maybe some big lower lips. Okay, there you go. So there's her lips. She's got like a pretty delicate chin. Okay, and then here, again, we have the forehead pulling away. Maybe she's got curly hair. Why not? And then the brow. So we know that the brow muscles are here. But just because I drew two spheres doesn't mean everybody has to have angry furrow brows. That's just the structure of the muscles. So now we can have create a great delicate eyebrow coming off of there. We can do that. Let's do it like that. Yep. And then we need to think about the eyes. So remember, don't draw the eyes up here. You have to have enough room for a giant socket and a giant eyeball and the lids to go around that eyeball. So just make sure you're paying attention to how much space you're leaving for yourself, because you have to have enough space for like the bones and the muscles. All that structure is in there. So just, don't ignore that. Yeah, it'll really help your drawings out if you just pay attention a little bit to the anatomy and to, like leaving space for stuff. If stuff goes into its right space, you can get away with a lot in terms of like the exact, line work that you do. As long as it's in the right space, the line could be like that or like that or like that. Doesn't really matter as long as that line is in the right area, right? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave me an angry comment. So I'm gonna kind of modify her eyebrow, make it a little bit like a kind of like a sharp penciled brow, and we might see a little bit, because you can just see the eyebrow here, so we might see a little bit of her other eyebrow coming around, and we might see like her lashes, because maybe she's got, so right, once you have the eye, once you have the big, go big to small, but once you have the big, then you can do stuff like drawing in eyelashes, right? And then you can be confident that they're just adding instead of subtracting from your drawing, because they're in the right place. So now if we give her like some heavy lashes and stuff, you might see that on the other side if they're long enough, so we can kind of see that. So that is the sphere of the socket. So I can have a little bit of shade coming in here, just showing that this is, it's like it's tucked behind. Your eye socket it dips in, it doesn't pop out on top of your face. It goes into your face. So this is why you have shadows and shading in here under your brow. So this is all tends to fall in shadow, right? If the light's above you. But you can see that. So we're using the exact same techniques, but we can make something nice and delicate. We might want to add a soft shadow coming up from her eye to indicate her cheek. And again, that cheek could be like this kind of cheek, or like flat cheek, or inward pulling cheek. People have a huge range for their where their cheekbone is. Like if their cheekbone's up here, she's gonna have a big strong one. If her cheekbone's back, if it's back here, then it's gonna be all soft, right? So just keep in mind that. But you don't have to draw at all. I can just, because I want her to be a little bit of a softer character, I can just indicate it with a little shadow, and now you can tell where the cheek is without it looking hideous. Just keep in mind, remember that the eye to the cheek to the where the nostril tucks to the mouth is like a pathway on your face. That just is one muscle. Well, it's not one muscle, but it's a muscle group that connects in this way. So it's got that flow. So it's eye to cheekbone to nose, nostril, thing to where your mouth, where like a dimple would be on your mouth. So just keep in mind, like that's a really sharp thing with him here because he's got a sharp cheek, but it's still applying. That's much smoother with her, but it's still applying. So just keep that in mind. And we could even give her a little bit of that. Like it's on this path. So let's just indicate that she's got that with like a cute dimple. See, now if I just indicate it with a dimple, is that cute? I don't know. Maybe it's not cute. But if I don't think it's that cute. But maybe I can make it cute. There, little dimple. Then instead of making it this like big hideous crone thing, I can just indicate it with a little dimple and you get it, and you don't have to draw that, which is horrible. Okay, and then also there might be the bridge to her nose like in there. So if you want to have like a soft shadow in there, I think that that's something that you could do. But again, don't overdo it. Just go very soft and very light with this kind of stuff, because the instant that you like draw a line just because you saw a wrinkle is the instant where you make a character or a portrait look really ugly. So just be really careful with that. And as long as you're careful with that, it's going to look pretty good. So we'll give a little cast shadow from her nose, because she will still cast a shadow, but we're just going to make it really soft so it doesn't take over her face. And then her lips, of course, are going to cast their own shadow, and boom, we're done. Okay, so we have two different faces made with the exact same ideas using the sphere method. And again, if you want to get that sphere brush, just look at the links down below. I give it to you guys because I like you. So here's that sphere brush. You can use that to draw from the side in profile or from the front. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're trying this stuff out, practicing it, you know? And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or otherwise, just let me know. Leave it in the comments. I'll see you guys later.
Yamsketch.